Welcome back to CryptosRUs. I am George. We're all George. In this interview, I have with me the co-founder and president of Zilliqa, Amrit Kumar, and he's going to be talking all about Zilliqa, and I have some very, very important questions to ask. So thank you, Amrit, for being on the show.
Thank you very much, George, for inviting me over. And hello to all the listeners and viewers.
I don't know if I said that right. Are you the current president or co-CEO? I just want to get that correct. I don't know.
Okay, so we have a president title. We have, we have all sorts of titles these days.
Okay.
So I am one of the co-founders. There were 7 co-founders back in the day. So I'm one of those 7 co-founders. I'm also the president, and we basically have a CEO office, and we have Colin, who is also chief commercial officer, who sits alongside me, and we oversee everything.
Okay. Okay. So the reason why I asked, and I'm glad you brought that up about the 7 co-founders, obviously you're still with the team. One of the things I think a lot of people got caught off guard was in 2019 when 2 of the co-founders, at the current time, I believe the CEO and CTO, they left. And I believe there was a big transition. So can you talk about that? Like, how did the team handle that transition? How did you, among others, step up, and did anything really change after that?
Yeah, so it was. Thank you for asking this question. So I'm sure that many people, have been, they do it. We tried to answer those questions back in the day, but very recently, I even, there was something that came up about, someone asked me on Twitter on what you feel proud about, and I really feel proud that we have been able to pull ourselves out from that. So. Yeah, so the whole thing what happened was around May 2019. This was a time when we had launched our mainnet, but the mainnet was sort of, first stage, which means that you could send transactions, miners were able to mine blocks, but you could not run contracts. So it was just before that, and around June time, we were about to launch and enable smart contracts. So it was a time when, and as you can imagine, blockchain world is a harsh world. It takes all your energy out. When you start from a small startup of 3 or 4 people, you have to do the fundraise, you have to do white paper, you have to write your code, you have to build a community, and it starts to become draining at some point. So, what happened around that time was, the CEO basically decided that, now it's time to sort of, let it go, because he felt that it was a bit too much. So, and soon after, CTO left as well. But I think the way we have been working as a team was very sort of splendid in some sense, because, myself, the CEO back then, and CTO, we're sort of, holding certain pillars. For example, the CEO was mostly sort of focusing on the business aspects of things. For example, getting ZIL token listed on different exchanges, making sure that there are people who might be interested in building applications of our platform and so on. So doing the biz dev part. While the CTO was very focused on the technical development part, so making sure that the platform gets launched and the mainnet gets live. While my role was slightly on the back end, and I was mostly responsible on doing research. So making sure that at that time, we wanted to develop a new smart contract language. We want to make sure that that happened in a nice way. So I was mostly on the back end side, but at least, we were very independent in that sense. So it was we don't have a hierarchy in that sense. We always had a flat structure. So in a way, once both of them left, obviously that was a time when the market was really, really bad. Zilliqa's rank was around 87, 90 around that time. So it was roughly speaking 2 to 3 cents, 4 cents. So times were not really good, overall for the general market and also for Zilliqa. And so, the community was also not very healthy at that time, because, the price was going down. It was not looking good from all sides. But the good thing was that, we really pulled ourselves out. Some of the good team members who joined back then, they really came up and steered the ship in the right direction. And now I think we are at a point where everyone feels to be proud of being a part of Zilliqa as a company and Zilliqa as a community. So I feel really blessed to have the team behind me and the community who has been very supportive.
I think that's a great story, because obviously there was adversity that you guys had to go through, right? And you guys did get through it, and now you're prospering because of it, right? A lot of projects just couldn't do it. They just, disappeared. But yeah, so thanks for answering that. That leads me to my next question. You talked about, at the time you launched your mainnet, didn't have smart contracts. Now that you do, right? And I'm looking at your roadmap, and I think a lot of people are also asking this question: why are you not updating your roadmap on your website?
Yeah,
because it's
we have
still
been asked
June of 2020.
Yeah, this question many times. The reason why we have not updated is because I would say 90% of the projects that are actually listed on the roadmap are already done. So we have already finished everything that we had planned to. Probably a few projects, which is one is around ZK Snark. So we started that project, but we put that on hold for a while. We also listed around L2 scaling that we felt that, okay, we should rather focus on code infrastructure side right now and improve latency on the code infrastructure because the scalability is not a problem for us. So rest of the projects are actually done. It's all about, what we've also felt that, we are at a juncture where, we are not at the ICO level where you have to excite your investor and say, look, we are going to promise these things and we are going to build these things and you have to give us money so that we can build these projects. We're not at that stage yet. So we're at a stage where we have to show the growth in the ecosystem. So it's not so much about what we're building anymore. Because at the end, tech has to go in the background. So whatever we're building has to go behind the scenes and people have to see the dApps that we're building. So the idea that we are discussing internally and we have sought feedback from the community as well, is that our plan would be to actually put out a blog post, a full-blown blog post that will have details on what we plan to work on in terms of whether it be improving staking, whether it be improving the DEX contract and so on. And then we'll be issuing all sorts of zips, so Zilliqa improvement proposals, where you will have all sorts of details on how those things will be implemented. And so you can actually keep track. And back then, we were so focused on developing that we didn't have much time to actually engage with the community, talk to the community. But now everything is in public. You actually, whatever we do, it goes out immediately on GitHub, and people actually start tweeting out. We have governance mechanisms. People actually see when we make changes to certain parameters in the system. People actually see that those changes are being made. So I would like to go in that sort of open sort of manner of showing people the progress, and rather than promising 19 projects and giving vague timelines on that. I don't believe that in anymore. So I would rather show to people that, look, we are building these things, check it out and use it and tell us feedback, and we will actually improve based on your feedback. So that's kind of the model we're going for.
Okay, so that's like the complete opposite of Cardano. Cardano has these grand roadmaps, and then they build towards that, but it's very hyped up, like what's coming next and so forth. But I do agree with what you're saying. At some point, roadmap or white paper just don't mean anything, right? It's just a matter of developing it and showcasing that you can and that it works. So, I mean, some of the things I saw, you mentioned that most of it's done. I saw some things like working on your storage layer and also implementing sharding on smart contracts, and then interoperability. So can you talk about some of those things? Are they done, or are they still work in progress?
These are all done. So in terms of storage, this is exactly why sort of staking started. So so we are not a proof of stake system. So we are not like Cardano, we are not like Tezos and so on. So we are still a very proof of work plus BFT, so Byzantine fault tolerance sort of mechanism based consensus protocol. So we don't use POS staking mechanism to validate blocks. However, we had all these nodes who have to provide who have to store the transaction history. For example, let's say Explorer. Explorer has to show all the transaction history. So they have to store the entire transaction history, all the transactions that ever happened. So what the idea, and we also felt that there are, if you're familiar with Ethereum, they have Infura nodes where these are sort of basically endpoints to the actual network. So if you want to connect and send transaction, you basically connect to the Infura node, and then the Infura node basically relays your transaction to the rest of the network. So you feel that we were having sort of these nodes coming up, and we're having these service providers wanting to sort of host these nodes and provide services to the network. So these are not consensus nodes. So these are sort of nodes that sit outside of the main network. And we felt that one good idea would be to actually build an incentive mechanism for those nodes so that they can store these data, and they are incentivized to store that data. So what we did was we built this staking mechanism where if you want to become one of those nodes, what we call seed nodes, you have to stake a certain amount of capital. And if you do so, then you are allowed to become one of those nodes. And then, you provide that service. And if you don't provide the service, if your service is bad, then you won't earn the rewards. And this way we have now mushroomed, I think 15, 20 nodes that we have right now in the ecosystem that provide these APIs. And these APIs are now free for people to use. In case of Infura, you have to pay a certain sum to access, developers have to pay a certain sum to access those nodes. But in our case, you don't have to, because the network basically takes care of that. So this is to answer the first question on seed node. For smart contract sharding, we have been very aggressive on finding ways to improve the way smart contracts get handled on a sharded architecture, because it's not an easy problem to solve. So what we did recently was we published a paper in one of the top conferences in programming language theory called PLDI, and it literally probably will go public in a few weeks or so. So this research has been done. So the next step is basically to implement that into Zilliqa. What else? We also started working on interoperability, as you mentioned. So we have been, and there's not something that we are doing right alone. There are other projects who are doing this as well. But we had this on the roadmap for quite a while. Starting 2020 basically. And what we have done so far is we have used a third-party network called Poly Network, and we're using that to connect to rest of the chains. So for example, we will connect to Polynet, and Polynet already connects to Bitcoin, Ethereum. So we transitively connect to all these other nodes. So we have also made progress on this, and our target for this launch would probably be end of this quarter or mid or end of this quarter. So again, our model will not be that, oh, here's the date and you go for it and you will see everything happening. But the moment we have a version that we can allow people to play around with, so we'll release a public testnet, and people will be able to test those that bridge. We'll be able to give us feedback on what works and what doesn't work, whether in terms of the core infrastructure side or in terms of user experience, and then we'll improve that. And then once we are comfortable, and once the community is comfortable with it, we'll launch a production system. So this is to give you a sense of some of the progress that we have made across the four projects.
So that partner is called Polynet.
Yes, it's called Polynet.
Okay. I never heard of them, so I just want to.
So basically, this Polynet is imagine, for example, if you want to communicate between Zilliqa and Ethereum, let's say. These are isolated islands, right? So you want a way to communicate. So you want a way to sort of send message from one network to the other one. And basically, Polynet basically sits in between them, and it basically relays messages across the two chains. So it was, we basically had to integrate with that Polynet, and then everything basically works out.
What about, because one of the things I was going to ask you about was your in-house DEX, the ZilliqaSwap, right? Which I hear is very successful right now, 216 million total value locked in. Right now, it seems like that's only concentrating on ZRC2 tokens, right? Is there plans to have that bridge or use Polynet so that you can transact with the ERC20 tokens or BEP20 tokens or something like that in the future?
Yeah, that's exactly the plan. So the way it will work is once we have the bridge live, so what will happen is, let's say if you have Ethereum sitting on Ethereum chain, you could bring them over to Zilliqa chain and be able to trade them at a cheaper rate with low fees. Or you could use those Ethereum assets in, for example, a MakerDAO-like system that we have called Pillar. So you could put that asset into Pillar and then borrow stable coins against that. So and this extends to all ERC20s. This extends to BTC as well. So you could bring those assets and use them on top of Zilliqa. And of course, stable coins. So once we have those stable coins, you could imagine building let's say a lending market for those stable coins. Because as you know, Compound, Aave, or even centralized services like Blockfolio and Celsius, there's a huge market for stable coin lending. Right. You earn around 10% or 10% of interest rate on stable coins itself. So the idea would be to bring those stable coins like USDT and USDC so that we could build products like money market funds.
Yep, interesting. So this is all DeFi right now. Is there any plans to move into NFTs, because that's like the real hot thing right now? Any marketplace plans or anything like that?
Yeah, so we have an NFT marketplace called Mintable, in which for those who are following the news, Mark Cuban invested into Mintable recently.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so that's it's quite in limelight recently. It has been quite limelight recently. So we have a marketplace where you can actually go and mint your NFTs and be able to trade them. In fact, our first journey into NFTs started with Unstoppable Domains, which is an ENS-like domain name system. So basically, you replace your account address by, let's say, george.zil, and you can send money to george.zil. Right. And this basically gets translated and resolved to actual account address on the blockchain. So this system was developed in 2019, and so that that domain name that you own can actually be an NFT basically. So we had sort of ventured into NFTs much earlier, but now we are actually looking into sort of bringing celebrities and artists who are interested in working on this. So we have worked with two artists in the US, Soulja Boy and Starkiller. So these are both DJs and musicians. And the idea is to, now very recently we announced a well-known boxer called Terence Bud Crawford, who would be issuing his NFTs on Zilliqa. So the idea is to bring some of these celebrities to issue these NFTs, which will be backed by physical assets as well. So for example, if you buy one of those NFTs, you will have access to, for example, one of their signed jerseys, for example, or signed boxing gloves, for example. So these things are something that we're working on right now.
Yeah, that's smart. Celebrities drive so much fans. I mean, there's so many celebrities that's getting in, athletes getting in. So Mintable, is that created by you guys, or you're just supporting that project?
We supported them. So we sort of gave them a grant and investment in the early days, and they developed a platform, a marketplace for NFTs.
Awesome. And I love the example, because I always go bring up Unstoppable Domains, because I actually worked with them before. I didn't even think about that is actually an NFT, right? To be able to create a custom domain. So that's is that how it works? It's locked into a token, basically,
so,
those domain names?
I mean, initially the way you issue it, it's just issued directly as a part of the contract, but you could see it as an NFT. So you could actually sort of convert that into an NFT if you wanted to.
Okay. Do you guys still work closely together with them, or they kind of?
I mean, Unstoppable Domains, driving a considerable number of transactions on our platform. So we definitely work very closely with them.
Yeah, I know I worked with them early on, but now they're partnering up with like Cloudflare and stuff like that to get their domains. It's pretty wild. Things move really, really quick.
I mean, when we sort of were talking, in the early days, it was early 2018, I would say, early 19. And, back then, it was a very small startup, but after that, they got investments from, Tim Draper and so on. So that really boosted, and, I think they drove a lot of sales for their platform, for their domains. So I think they have been very successful.
So are there anything right? Is there anything right now? I know a lot of projects, and I don't know if this is the case with you. A lot of projects are transitioning to like their mainnet 2.0, where it's like faster, or there's more native contracts, or some kind of improvement. Is there something like that with Zilliqa, or it's a continuous add-on?
No, definitely. I mean, I won't say that it's going to be a one-shot mainnet 2.0, but as I said earlier, our goal is to make incremental progress, and so that people can see that the team is actually working towards improving the platform.
Right.
So we obviously, when we started out, you always have to meet deadlines. I mean, you meet deadlines, sometimes you have to make sacrifices in terms of design decisions. So, and we did some of those design decisions as well. We made those decisions as well. Now the idea is now that we have time, now we are looking into sort of improving some of those platforms, optimizations on the platform. And one of the ideas is around sort of smart contract scalability. So how to process smart contracts in a much better way, so that we're working on. One very good example would be when we launched the smart contract, we had an interpreter that used to interpret language, your contract. And usually interpreters are much sort of, they're slower compared to a compiler. So right now what we're working on is to build a compiler that will run your contracts, and therefore would be able to be at least 10 times faster than an interpreter. So we made some of these design choices, and this is one example. It's made some of these design choices back in the past, but now we are working towards improving them. But yeah, it's not going to be like December 2021, there's going to be Zilliqa 2.0, but it is going to be a gradual process where you will see improvements as we move along.
Right. All right. So next question is, without getting too technical, I know Zilliqa was the first project I came across, and I think you guys were the first to implement sharding on a blockchain and actually made it work, which, obviously there's many inherent benefits, very fast and so forth, right? Since then, a lot of competition has come out with their own chains, right? To name a few, like Elrond or Harmony. There's a lot that's using sharding. So how do you guys stand out from the crowd, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's something that I've been telling, internally and even externally as well, that of course, if someone improves upon what you've been, one thing that I'm really proud of is that at least we started the trend of, that we actually show to the world that, sharding actually is a promising solution to work on in terms of scalability, and you should work on it. And therefore, we are seeing multiple projects out of sort of trying to reach out and trying to build on top of what we started to build. So that's an encouraging thing that shows that, what we worked on was meaningful. number one. But obviously, they are working on different angles, and we are working on improving sharding in different ways. So, for example, most of the work that some of these sort of follow-up work on sharding projects have been doing is mostly on the network side. So they are thinking of how to make sure that you can run contracts, or how you can make sure that the processing capability of the network is high, but by only at the level of the network. And what we are, for example, looking into right now is to how to leverage languages, how to leverage smart contract language itself to be able to make things much faster. So we are looking at sort of a way to decide, given a contract, whether it's shardable or not, whether it's how easy it's going to be for you to shard this contract and process this contract in a much better way. So this is something that no one is doing right now. So, and this is kind of the paper that I was mentioning about earlier. So, and the second part in the end that I mentioned earlier is, in the end, people want something that they can use. People want something, and people want a platform where they can use some of these dApps. And in terms of that, if you look at the number of transactions that Zilliqa has been processing compared to all the other chains out there, after EOS, Tron, and Ethereum, we are probably at number 6 or number 7 in terms of number of transactions that we process. If you look at ZilliqaSwap, you mentioned earlier, ZilliqaSwap was more of a side project for us in some sense, and yet it has acquired a TVL of around $200 million, which puts us roughly close to number 6 in ranking in terms of all dexes out there. That gives you a sense that there's a lot of activity going on with the Zilliqa chain, and that's something that we have to work on and make sure that gives us head start against all the other chains out there.
So you mentioned speed. So I want to ask you. You mentioned you're probably like 4th or 5th. What is the official transactions you can handle per second?
So we continuously run tests on different capacities. Again, it's very difficult to say that because network numbers always change in some sense, and different types of transactions exist. So, for example, if you are only sending a transaction where you are transferring, let's say, ZILs or Ether from one address to other, these transactions are much easier to process. While if you're handling, let's say, Uniswap-like transaction, then it's much costly. So it takes more time. So we ran some experiments back in the day, and we were able to see that we could actually easily hit around 2,400 transactions per second on the network that we had back then.
Okay.
And the idea is, with these interpreters, with these optimizations that we're working on sharding, hopefully the number will go up by the fact that we'll be reducing latency in the processing of transactions.
So because there's always this debate, and I tend to lean on one side because early on, especially during ICO days, people would throw out large numbers. I remember projects that say we could handle 1 million transactions per second, but they're mostly in some test lab with perfect conditions and very limited things, so they can hype it up. So just your views for Zilliqa to become a widely adopted, used blockchain that can handle thousands to tens of thousands of apps. Can you get there? Or does there need to be still evolution before you could get there?
If you look at current status of usage of all the blockchains out there, obviously Ethereum is the one that's most, that's being used the most. And the load that Ethereum receives today is around 1.3 to 1.4 million transactions per day. If my math is correct, it's around less than 10 to 15 transactions per second. Right. So if you see right now, people who are sort of saying that, we can do 1 million or 1 trillion transactions per second, there's not that much of activity right now. What are you going to literally do with that many transactions today? Right. And yes, you could argue that, okay, if you had a platform like that, then you could build all sorts of fancy things. Sure, but I don't think you have enough user base today. To give you a sense of how much users you have today in the Ethereum ecosystem, for example. So if you look at all the addresses that are out there that hold non-zero Ether, that's around 143 million. And if you look at the number of users that are using the dApps, especially the DeFi dApps, because they are the dApps that are probably most used today. Right. Uniswap, over 7 days, Uniswap receives around 110 to 120,000 traders. So trades basically. So the number of traders is a tiny portion of the total number of users who actually hold Ether. And the point I'm trying to drive here is there are so many people, more than 90% of the people who hold Ether, but who have never used a single dApp. Yeah. Now, from that angle, of course, you can boast about 1 million transactions and 10 million transactions per day, but there's not that demand out there right now. So as long as you can hit, I think, a few thousand transactions, you are pretty safe in the safe zone in terms of handling whatever capacity is going to come in the next 2 to 3 years time, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess we'll just have to see in the future, because I've seen numbers thrown around like Facebook is like millions of transactions per second, I think, or something like that, or per month or something. No, it's probably not per month; it's per second. But I've seen numbers, staggering numbers like that. But I'm thinking that there has to be a better way to do things, because recently, for example, Visa just announced that they're settling transactions on top of Ethereum. And you got to figure, well, if Ethereum could only handle 15 transactions per second right now, how's that possible? There has to be like batch jobs or something that they're doing to make it possible. You don't actually need like 100,000 transactions per second to handle it.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's exactly why, some of the L1 chains, will potentially become a sort of settlement layer, and you will have off-chain or L2s that will help you sort of do the actual trades in day-to-day. So, of course, there is a cost to decentralization. There's, you can't deny that fact.
Right.
And from that angle, I think for the next year and a half, I'm sure that, any chain out there, if you're doing, let's say 100 to 200 transactions per second, you would be pretty safe.
Are there any dApps or projects, specifically DeFi or anyone else, that have moved over to Zilliqa from Ethereum?
So I won't say people have moved over, but people have certainly built on both chains. So, for example, when you look at unstoppable domains, they started out as a domain name system to be built on Zilliqa, and then they also built a version on Ethereum. So they have .zil on Zilliqa and .crypto on Ethereum.
Wow, okay.
We had a Singapore dollar-backed stablecoin that was launched a few months ago, and you'd be surprised to actually know that if you look at all the world currencies out there that have been tokenized, and if you look at the market cap of those currencies, obviously the first one is USD, US dollar-backed stablecoins, because they are the reserve currency of the world. The second is euro, and third is actually Singapore dollars. And that market cap is actually driven by experts. So they have around around $40 million of market cap today, which is obviously smaller than USD-backed stablecoin, but yet much higher than any other local other currency. But anyway, so we have XSD, which again is issued on Zilliqa, and a version is again on Ethereum. We have Mintable, which is one on Zilliqa. So there's one marketplace on Zilliqa and one marketplace on Ethereum. So I would say that this is the world that we're going to live in, where you will have interoperability. People would see and would be more, let's say, pragmatic about building. So they would see that if there's a chain that has users, then they will go and build something for those users. And that's kind of what we're seeing with, we can all like and hate Binance chain, smart chain. But people are not moving, but people are building and trying to cater to the audience and consumers that are out there.
Right.
So I think this is the world we are going to live in, where people will be building same product, but for different chains. It's similar to iPhone and iOS and Android, for example. You have Facebook on iOS as an app, and you have the same one on Android. So probably that model will be something that will work.
What about oracles? Do you partner up with Chainlink, or do you have another partner, or do you have something in-house?
Yeah, so we built, with the help of a partner, we had built something called Teaks.io. So it used to work and rely on Intel SGX. But unfortunately, back then, there were not enough dApps that would require an Oracle system. We also partnered with Chainlink, and we had that integration done as well. Now we are sort of looking into building, sort of, for example, synthetic products that will definitely use Chainlink like Oracle. So so far we have not had the opportunity to use, but now we have a MakerDAO-like contract called a system called Pillar that's using an Oracle system, and will hopefully someone will build a synthetic product that will also use a Chainlink like Oracle.
Okay. Now, hopefully I don't have the wrong project, but I remember reading something about you guys doing something together with Neo and Ontology. Is there some kind of connection that formed recently?
This project that I talked about, the bridge project, where we are building bridge between Ethereum and Zilliqa, so that project is actually called Polynet. And Polynet is very close to Ethereum. So it's the Polynet that basically connects Neo and Ontology and other chains as well. So that's probably the only connection that we have.
Okay. So it connects beyond just Ethereum. It connects.
Yeah, it connects. Yeah, it connects all sorts of things. I think it connects smart, Binance Smart Chain, even Cosmos, and Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I think even Elrond. I think.
Okay. I'm gonna throw you a trick question. So, if you had to say something good about one other chain that fascinates you, which one would you choose?
I would say Cosmos.
Cosmos?
Yeah.
And why would you say that?
I would say that they have been building the ecosystem really from the ground up. And you can literally see the effect of and then the work that they have been doing on building that ecosystem. That really shows. I haven't seen any other project other than, let's say, Ethereum after that, which has that growing band or spectrum of projects that is being building. So I'm really again, I'm looking at, not from a competition angle, but I'm looking at what they're doing. I'm trying to also learn from what they have been doing. So I'm really fascinated by what they do.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Cosmos too. All right, last question. Very simple. I just want to get your thoughts on Bitcoin overall.
Well, Bitcoin is obviously has started the whole space. You can people are, marketing all sorts of things today, saying that we are improving on Bitcoin and so on. But the fact still remains that all these protocols, including Zilliqa, by the way, all these protocols, including Zilliqa, are much more complicated. And when you build something very complicated, it becomes very risky. You can make all sorts of mistakes when you're a complicated system. Obviously, generally speaking, systems generally try to become more and more complex over time. But the fact still remains that Bitcoin has a beauty that no other protocol has today. So I still believe in the idea that Bitcoin and Satoshi started. And the sad reality is, I think if Satoshi had submitted his white paper to a proper academic conference, it would have been rejected with all sorts of comments. So it definitely didn't fit in the regular academic format. But today we can see how successful Bitcoin has been and what sort of a wave it has created of all sorts of invention and innovations today. So I'm really excited about what Bitcoin can bring us, not itself, but even in other spectrums in the future.
So what do you say to, and I think Michael will eventually come around, but Michael Saylor is like of course, a Bitcoin guy, but he doesn't really recognize altcoins or just projects in general like yours, right? He believes that everything could be like a layer 2 add-on to the Bitcoin network, like anything from DeFi to anything else. What do you say to that?
Well, I appreciate what Michael says, but I've seen some of these comments recently, and they appear to be as if I won't say that he doesn't have a good understanding of what Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works, but it definitely looks like it's more of a marketing than there's. He does miss the points in Bitcoin quite a few times. So I won't say that let's not take him seriously on, but he definitely is doing something for the Bitcoin world, and I'm happy for that. But there's a little bit of marketing in the whole thing as well. So let's make sure that we understand the difference between what we are pitching to other people. And what the reality is.
All right, that's all the questions I had. I think we pretty much covered everything. So thanks for doing this with me. I think everyone watching is going to learn a lot about Zilliqa, and of course, anyone that is watching, if you want to find, if you want to learn more, check them out. Go to their. You guys have a Telegram, I'm assuming, your Medium blog, your website. Check them out. Amrit, I appreciate you coming on to the show once again.
Thank you very much, George, for inviting me over. It was lovely being here.
Until next time. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for my next video. All right, take care, guys. Bye-bye.